Okay, well, welcome back to another My Kids Locker COVID-19 Ed podcast episode. We're so excited today because we have a special guest for you, Pernille Rip. She is here to tell us a little bit about her journey as an extraordinary teacher and online amazing advocate for children to read across the globe. She is the one who created the Global Read Aloud, and I had first heard about her many years ago, actually, through Twitter. And she gets to spend some time with us talking to us about how we can bring joy to our children. And so, whether you are a kid listening to this, whether you are an educator, maybe you're a parent, this is a special episode where we get to talk to an expert in the field and be able to spend some time learning from this wonderful educator who is doing some powerful things, not only in her classroom and her community, but also through the online community. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here, Victoria, in these extraordinary times. So, I guess to give people a little bit of a background of what I do, I'm a seventh grade English teacher here in Madison, Wisconsin, originally from Denmark. I did not think that Wisconsin was going to be my home for many years, but it has been. And in 2010, I created a project called the Global Read Aloud. The initiative is fairly simple. We read a chosen book aloud to the kids that we teach or the kids that we have. And then we use tools to connect with others who are sharing the same read aloud at the same time around the world. This project started in 2010 with a simple goal in mind, one book to connect the world, and it continues to operate under that. Except now it's just not one book, it's K through 12. So we have a picture book author study, we have chapter books for the different levels. But the idea is still the same. Read alouds can bring us together. And especially when we look at our similarities, read alouds can break down fears and dangers that we see in other communities that we don't understand. And so every year the Global Read Aloud has grown organically. And with that, we have now connected millions of kids around the world. It starts in October, but that doesn't mean you can't be sharing the value and joy of reading right now. I think that's been what's been really important in my own household as we adjust to this new normal, where we're taking it day by day because we don't know what the world is going to look like tomorrow. And we also don't know when our kids will return to school. So balancing my own teaching, I get to be with almost 80 incredible seventh graders every day in my classroom in Oregon, Wisconsin. I also get to be a mom at home to 4 kids, ages 6, 7, 7, and 11. And so a conversation that we've had a lot at our house right now is simply, how do we find joy when the world seems a little bit scary and the world seems a little bit overwhelming? How do we make space for those things that otherwise make us feel normal? And reading is a part of that. And yet I also know that our reading is probably impacted by what's happening in the world. I know it certainly took me a while to get back into reading because I had so many thoughts going on in my head. And so as a family, we've decided to go back to what we know works for us. Reading aloud, sharing books, laughing about books, and finding books that we can connect with. We were lucky in that we were able to go to our public library before they shut down in the state and stock up on audiobooks. I knew giving my kids the choice to have playaways would make a huge difference as they could go about their day still listening to great books. And that's certainly been happening as they do the chores or we ask them to clean their room. We also say, hey, now would be a great time to listen to a great story. We got a lot of different choices, but I know that not all parents have that. And so finding online storytelling can also be really helpful for kids as they do kind of the more boring tasks that they're stuck with doing at home where there isn't a lot of extra things happening. And listening to stories together is really important because right now we are seldom in our car, but once in a while we go to the grocery store and it becomes a field trip as one parent goes in and grabs the groceries. And so then the other parent stays behind and listens to a book via Audible or Libro FM, which is an incredible resource that's out there for audiobooks. But don't forget about your libraries. They may be virtually shut down in many places or physically shut down, but they're not virtually shut down. Are there books that you can get through some sort of overdrive or another service that your library might offer? I think bringing books into our lives and making them a central part of the journey that we're on is really important right now. Stories bring us together. They help us add words to our language that we can speak about, that we can laugh about. My kids will bring up moments that happen both in the picture books we read aloud, but also in the stories we listen to, and so will my students. Now that we don't have this community built into our classrooms where we get to sit and make stories with students, we can move it online if we have the capability to do so. Friday night, I was sitting and thinking about my students. We had an abrupt closure. We didn't get to say goodbye or what do you need or how can we handle what we're, this transition into online or whatever it's going to look like. And I thought to myself, in my classroom, when things seem really out of whack or we just need a reset, we would grab a picture book. And so that's what I did. My kids found a picture book for me to read aloud to all of my students. And it was a hot mess as far as the recording. My husband brought our hedgehog on my shoulder, and my kids were laughing and trying to be in the camera because that's so fun. And yet it was authentic. It was a real read aloud of a funny picture book, and I followed all of the guidelines given to us by publishers, and I posted it unlisted on our YouTube channel. And I told my students, in case you need a read aloud, here you go. And so I think what we can do in this extraordinary time is simply go back to what we know. Reading brings us together. Reading can help us escape a world that somehow seems really scary. And reading can also continue to teach us in many ways that we might not have access to right now. So if you're sitting at home with kids wondering how to get them to read, I would ask the kids, what do you want to read? If you're sitting at home wondering how to get access, I would put a plea out online. If you have access, who has books that they can get to you? Because I think about the books that my kids have access to and how incredibly book rich we are. But I know that that's not the reality for many others. So if you're sitting somewhere where there are no books, we would like to help. How can we get books to you? You can ask your community of students, do you have access to books, and brainstorm ways to get it. I'm seeing it happening in schools across the world. How can we get physical print books in the hands of kids because digital and online is not going to be enough? And then how can we have kids do meaningful work? These are extraordinary times, and so it can be very comforting to slip into routines that we know have worked in our classrooms, and yet at the same time we also have to give each other grace. What may work when we were sitting in our learning environment at school might not work at home. And I think often what we do when things feel a little bit shaky is that we reach for accountability measures, but we don't really think about how that can further stop reading from happening. And so what would be a natural way for kids to talk about their reading, or natural in as much of a way we can give them in these artificial times? How would they like to talk about what they're reading? What would they like to do with their reading? How can we honor choice and the unique circumstances that students are in? And how can we get the adults that surround them that probably are going through a lot right now to take part in that? I think my biggest thing as I think about the future and the unknown of everything right now is that this too shall pass. And I think that at some point, too, we have to realize that whatever happens is what's going to happen. But educators will pick up the pieces. When kids come back to our classrooms, whenever that may be, we will pick up the pieces and we will continue on a journey that now has changed. Because that's what we do all the time. And I think it's important that we communicate that to our parents and our caregivers who are sitting at home trying to do school right now, is that nothing is worth adding more stress to your family. That yes, you can have expectations, but you also know your child best. And the best thing that you can do right now is to take care of yourselves and one another. So if there's a way to involve reading in that, do it. But if reading and then producing is adding more stress, then find a better way. Um, and then I think also to know that you're not alone. All of us, even those who have many years of teaching experience and who go out and talk about how to create joy and all of these things in reading, we're trying to figure it out at home as well. Today, my kids, some of them are learning and some of them are refusing, and that's just the reality. And we have to give ourselves grace as well. So I think there's so much we can do, but I think it comes down to the basics. Use reading as a way to create memories for your family right now. Use reading as a way to kind of shield ourselves from the reality of the world. And also use reading as a way to learn more about others, because we are going to come back together. And what an extraordinary time this is, and what an extraordinary opportunity this is to learn about the lives of others.
Wow, that's very profound about the power of just reading and what we can do during this extraordinary time, because it is. Most of us, if not all of us, are at home most of the time. Some of us are at home all of the time and with our children. What do you think about what kids are seeing? Do you think that us modeling to our children what it means to enjoy learning is something that could be a piece to this extraordinary journey about mom and dad sitting down with a book and reading, and then the children watching the parents read? Do you think that's a piece of this journey too, about the modeling and what the kids are hearing and seeing, and that, oh, mom and dad are responding to the suffering through spending time reading and being able to just enjoy a book? Do you think the modeling piece for adults is, and for the kids, I guess,
Absolutely.
is a huge piece?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If there's space for it, because that comes, I can only sit down and read in front of my children if I'm mentally in a space to do that. And not
Mm,
every adult that surrounds the children out in the world are in a space to do that. So,
mm,
yes, of course, I would love that every child, whomever is taking care of them, if they had active reading adult role models around them. But I would also say that that means that the adult that's taking care of them needs to be in a place to sit down and use books as a way to escape. And
mm,
so I think that's something that we can certainly work on. But I also don't want the adults, all the single parents and the caregivers and just all of the different family configurations we have to feel like, oh, here's one more thing I need to add to my plate. If it
mm,
adds stress, then I would work on it just like I would with a student or a child. How can you make reading something that is relaxing and not just another checkbox item? I think it's
mm,
been important for me to talk to my own kids about why I wasn't reading when they're used to seeing me read, and how else I'm approaching the world and learning, and having those conversations with kids about, like, the world does feel kind of scary right now, and I'm
mm,
choosing to read to shut that off, and bringing kids into that conversation. I think anytime we can put children with adult reading role models is always going to be a positive thing. Unless it just becomes this chase for perfection, then it does more harm than good. And so I
mm.
think it comes down to, again, what's going to work for your family. Because I think there's a lot of things that we can do for kids right now, but we might not all be in a place to do those things, and that's okay too.
Yes, and it's all about the capacity piece. Do the adults or even the kids have the capacity to be able to move on to that reading or move on to that even learning? I think at this time right now, we have to embrace the fact that many of us are still deer in headlights. We're still in that shock factor, and we're not necessarily working at the full capacity that we would like to. And with that being said, many of us teachers, yourself being a teacher and myself, I'm a teacher as well, we're kind of trying to grapple, what does this look like for online learning or remote learning, and what that looks like in the coming days and weeks and possibly even months ahead. Um, do you have any ideas or suggestions for those teachers who are trying to navigate this new educational digital territory on how to engage students? Should we suggest, having theme days where the kids, on the Fridays, okay, everyone, we're going to do a mystery read and everyone dress up in a mystery outfit or a character, whether it could be even a theme of Star Wars, we're reading a Star Wars book. Is there any suggestions on how you think that maybe educators could engage readers, engage their students in active ways during this season of our lives?
I think all of the ideas that you shared are great as long as they're not an expectation of kids, right? I think that anything that we can put out there as things that are accessible to students and ideas we have to continue our community are going to be powerful. I think where we need to be really careful is what we expect kids to do with it. Because every time I ask one of my students to do something, I'm actively also asking their family to do something. And so I have to be careful with how much I'm asking, right? Because at what point does it only further widen the gap that already exists within education and the debt that's owed to kids when they once again are excluded from opportunities, or they can't dress up, or they can't do these fun things? And so I think that's why I keep thinking about honoring choice and also individual situation, that we can't. I think first we start with mental health and what our kids need more than anything. And then we find ways to fit reading and meaningful reading opportunities into that while still providing choice. I think about the work that I'm assigning my own students, which, yes, of course, I'm hoping that they'll read. But first, I have to find out, do they have access to books? And then I also have to realize that some of them, even though they have plenty of access, may not be in a space to read. Okay, well, then if I'm going to have them do reading responses or reading analysis, I have to come up with a different thing that might seem more manageable, such as listen to a picture book that's read aloud and now answer this one question. So I think about, we can put things out there, but we just need to be careful with what we're expecting kids to do, because even something fun that we may have created may create hardship for someone else. And then I think too, we need to be really careful with, we need to continue to push back and ask deep questions, because I'm seeing a lot of things shared that aren't thinking about inclusive text, that aren't thinking about representation, that aren't thinking about the stress that this will add to kids. And I think we have to also continue as educators to have courageous conversations within our districts and provinces and saying, okay, is this really benefiting kids, or is this more because we want to make sure it looks like our teachers are fully accountable at all times? And I think like that, those conversations need to be had as well. I think it's easy to sit and create stuff for kids to do without thinking about what you're really asking kids to do and how it's going to impact those at home.
Right. And it sounds to me that meaningful experiences is where we're at right now. And with the fact that we have children that are going to be going online or are online right now with us through remote learning, some of those children, when they walk away from that screen, are dealing with a lot of issues, whether that means that their parents are unemployed or whether their family is sick or, unfortunately, if somebody has passed away. I mean, we're dealing with situations and um, relationship issues that we've never even had to navigate before. And if we had to navigate them, they were, once in a while. And now it's just, there's this a hard intensity of emotions and feelings. And, with kids having to try to process this whole pandemic, I mean, it's just such a hard thing to do. And I think as adults, we're struggling with that, and the kids are as well. But I think reading, as you mentioned, is such an awesome opportunity for kids to be able to, you know, go into a different world and to, expose themselves to different stories. And I think that when it comes down to it, we all know that we're in this together, but being able to bring kids into, I don't know, even just minutes of joy and minutes and hours possibly of opportunities of being able to say, we're in this together. Let's enjoy our connection, enjoy our relationships, and possibly reading can be a catalyst for that. And yeah, it sounds to me that you have some really amazing thoughts about what reading could mean and what it does mean to families. And I just really want to take the time to thank you for your vision and your stories and what you're doing in the world. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us? That any last thoughts or any comments that you'd want to share to kids, parents, or educators in this time in the season where we're trying to navigate, the pandemic?
I think the biggest thing that we can continue to say is that we got to, take care of ourselves and take care of each other, that no one should feel alone. And that, like I said earlier, when school starts back up again, we will figure it out. And no one should sit and have incredibly stressful moments at home because they're expected to sit and learn and teach and all of a sudden become their child's teacher. And so I think for me, that's going to be my mantra moving forward in this, is that the world will start up again. It may look incredibly changed, but we will pick up the pieces because that's what we do. That's what we do
Mm-hmm.
every single day. And so to know who your people are and to reach out if you're feeling overwhelmed or if you're feeling alone in any way, and get the community support, because if there's one beautiful thing that we've seen come out of this globally, right, it is that people are recognizing that they cannot just sit in their own circle, that they need to take care of their communities. And so that's what we need to do. Take care.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And I just want to take the time to thank you for your heartfelt message. I thank you so much for your empathy and your compassion, and the fact that you're all the way down in the States and I'm here in Canada, and your words ring true to all of us. We can all take a step back from this and say, we will get through this. And there is the light at the end of the tunnel. We're not quite sure how long that tunnel is, but we do know there's that light. And while we're walking through that tunnel, we can walk hand in hand. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us today at the COVID-19 Ed podcast. Thank you so much for your message, your continued message of care and love and kindness. And I hope that, I hope that your family keeps well. I hope that your students keep well. And I want to thank you again for just taking the time out of your day to have a little interview with us. So thank you so much, Pernille.
Absolutely. Take care.
Okay, well, take care, and I'm sure I will see you online. And for those listeners who are listening, you can find her website on pernillesrip.com and learn more about her and her journey as a teacher, author, creator, speaker, and mom. Well, I'm going to wrap up this COVID-19 Ed podcast episode. We were here interviewing Pernille, and we had a wonderful opportunity to listen to her insights into what it means to be a reader, what it means to be an educator, a mom, but also in our global community as we walk through our pandemic. So thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, please remember to listen, create, and innovate. Thanks so much for joining us today.